Thank you so much for joining me today, Bodour. I'm joined, for those of you back tuning in and curious who our guest is today, I'm joined by Bodour Al Qasimi, founder and CEO of children's publisher group, Kalimat Group. Bodour was also recently elected as president of the International Publishers Association. Quite an accolade and achievement, I have to say. And Bodour, I'm so delighted and grateful for your time and coming with me to share a couple of different themes that will journey through this next hour with you on, from being a modern Muslim woman, combining your passion and soul force in publishing and books, and how they help not just literacy, but healing too. And also, I'd love us to explore during this time together what being Muslim and a modern Muslim woman today means to you, and how combining mothering, working, works in the context of perhaps a different Islam that we both became familiar with whilst growing up. So, Bodour, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Tazeen, for having me. And I really appreciate all the wonderful work you're doing to make this world a better place. And I'm so honored to be sharing this space with you.
So let's crack in, Bodour. Let's just talk a little bit about your journey. Now, I've kind of been familiar with you over the last 2 decades, and what really has touched my heart is this sort of parallel experience coming through for many women, in particular Muslim women, I notice, that is to do with this deep healing and reconnection with the divine feminine. And I've seen many sharings by yourself alluding to your own journey with her. And so I'd love to touch base with you about this. You know, what does divine feminine mean to you, Bodour? And when did you start reconnecting with her?
Thank you, Tazeen, for that wonderful question. Before I share my thoughts with you on what divine feminine means to me, I just want to tell you that I'm really happy that this subject is now being discussed more often than it was in the past, because I really believe that most of the ills that we're facing the world today now have a solution embedded in the divine feminine core teachings. So when I think of divine feminine, I think of wisdom, justice, beauty, harmony, and compassion, sort of all the elements desperately needed in the world right now. I think of the unseen dimension of the soul to which we are connected through our instincts and our emotions that are also connected to our heart center. And as you know very well, the term divine feminine refers to the feminine face of God as expressed in different cultures all over the world. But regardless of how it's been interpreted, the divine feminine has been crucial in our evolution, urging us to discover a new ethic of responsibility towards the planet and our coexistence as a species. So, for hundreds of years of Western and other civilizations, there's been a fascination that's focused on power, on control, on conquest. And look at where that has led us now. But in a way, Goethe expressed it really nicely when he said, the eternal feminine is our guide. And we need this energy, this divine feminine vibration to guide us out of what we essentially created. And now the divine feminine, she's waking up from her long slumber to bring balance back into the world and restore wholeness into our lives. And it is this awakening that is helping us wake up to a new ethic of responsibility focused on the needs of our planet. The Divine Mother is asking us to trust, to protect life, to work with her in all that we do, to open our understanding to the knowledge that we're not separate from her, but we are actually an expression of her being. And if you look around you, the Divine Mother is everywhere. If we open our eyes and we know how to see, then we will be able to see her. In fact, in all of early cultures, there were many images and symbols that were attributed to the Divine Mother. So certain forms like the circle, the oval, The wavy line or the spiral from Paleolithic era were all recognizable signatures of the feminine. And you would find these in caves and later in the Neolithic area in pottery vessels, which were also a symbol of the Great Mother herself. If you look at the moon, for example, this is one of the most ancient symbols of the feminine and the association between the changing phases of the moon, the seasons of life, the life cycle of a woman as a maiden, as a mother, as a crone, is a foundation of immense mythology that was inspired by the experience of the moon as an image of the mystery of life and all her phases. And then, of course, there's also the sea. So it's another ancient reflection of the Great Mother. After all, that's where we came from, the Great Ocean. And if you look at Bronze Age mythology of Sumer and India, the Great Mother was the cosmic ocean, and she was personified as a serpent or a dragon. And this association with the sea and water goddess has been an underlying principle in ancient mythology. So if you think of Aphrodite being born from the sea, Isis and Mary were referred to as Star of the Sea. But women's experience of being the carrier and nurturer of life, the role of the Great Mother, bound to the rhythm of nature by her menstrual cycle and the 10 lunar months of gestation before the birth of her child, has really given profound meaning to her life. And if you look at countless millennia of the way women carried their children in the womb, gave birth to them, and nourished them during the early years, this endowed women with significance as the carrier of life, the guardian of nature. And in some cultures, she still fits that ancient role today. And if we want to understand the original human relationship with Mother Earth and all her wisdom, humility, and divine radiance, then we need to look at how the native people first revered her. And we need to listen humbly to the traditions of native peoples through songs, myths, and rituals, and living customs that preserve their truth, so we can remember who we were and what we still can be.
Wow. I mean, you've touched so deeply into so many different strands, and it's really beautiful how you've kind of pulled all of these things together, because there has been a huge sort of birth, if you like, of this consciousness linked to Mother, Divine Feminine, that's really coming to the forefront. Camille Helminski, my beloved teacher, Sufi teacher, is writing a book currently on Mary. And of course, there's a whole chapter in the Quran linked to Jesus, Isa, but it's Mary that the chapter is named on, which I think is actually really significant. And then Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, it was really beautiful. It's almost like, as my teacher Kabir Helminski says, he almost kind of knew what was to come, because when he talked about the Prophet meeting Allah on the night of Ascension, Laylat al-Miraj, the words that Rumi brings are to the effect of, it was Muhammad, peace be upon him, meeting his bride. And that, for me, again, it's not coincidence. There's these kind of sacred texts and sacred references, as you've alluded to, that's always been there for the feminine and mother. And actually, one of the poems that I believe you had shared, it really hit me, as I think it did many people. It was a poem about, it was really, really beautiful, actually, because in it you'd shared, when God created woman. And I'd love to read that, because I feel like the last line of it sort of links into the healing that this divine feminine energy is bringing through. So the poem says, or the reading says, and I believe it's by Donna Ashworth.
Yeah.
Is when God created woman, he was working late on the sixth day. The angel came by and asked, why spend so much time on her? The Lord answered, have you seen all the specifications I have to meet to shape her? She must function in all kinds of situations. She must be able to embrace several kids at the same time, have a hug that can heal anything from a bruised knee to a broken heart. She must do all this with only 2 hands. She cures herself when sick and can work 18 hours a day. The angel was impressed. Just 2 hands? Impossible. And this is the standard model? The angel came closer and touched the woman. But you have made her so soft, Lord. She is soft, said the Lord, but I have made her strong. You can't imagine what she can endure and overcome. Can she think? The angel asked. The Lord answered, not only can she think, she can reason and negotiate. The angel touched her cheeks. Lord, it seems this creation is leaking. You have put too many burdens on her. She is not leaking. It is a tear, the Lord corrected the angel. What's it for? Asked the angel. The Lord said, tears are her way of expressing her grief, her doubts, her love, her loneliness, her suffering, and her pride. This made a big impression on the angel. Lord, you're a genius. You thought of everything. A woman is indeed marvelous. Lord said, indeed she is. She has strength that amazes a man. She can handle trouble and carry heavy burdens. She holds happiness, love, and opinions. She smiles when she feels like screaming. She sings when she feels like crying, cries when happy and laughs when afraid. She fights for what she believes in. Her love is unconditional. Her heart is broken when a next of kin or friend dies, but she finds strength to get on with life. The angel asked, so is she a perfect being? The Lord replied, no. She just has one drawback. She often forgets what she is worth.
Yeah, I think it resonated with a lot of women, including myself. Yeah, we often forget, our own value. And I think, we put so much emphasis on looking after other people and valuing other people, and we often forget to value our own selves. And it's part of the return of the divine feminine to really honor her, really remember her, and remember how special we are as well as women, because we have the capacity to do things that men can't do. We've been gifted with this beautiful womb to carry life, and that's where a lot of our magic happens. The womb itself is essentially the sacred cauldron. And so I believe that remembering our strength and our magic and all of the beautiful qualities that we have, and sharing them with the world is something that I'd love to see happen with this new divine awakening, that divine feminine awakening that we're seeing unfold in front of our eyes.
So how, for example, has it helped with you in your own particular healing journey, Bodour? And also, I'd love to talk about, you're next to Saudi Arabia, the land of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and perhaps looking at the distortion on women through how we grew up with Islam. Where is that leaving you when you're reconnecting and going through this, your own healing with her?
So, as you probably have guessed from all of my Facebook shares and what I share on social media, the lockdown was really the beginning of my spiritual journey for me, I would say. I mean, it was really about me looking inward and really healing a lot of the ancestral trauma that we all have, and we sort of like avoid, and we keep ourselves busy, and we travel, and we do things so that we don't look inward. And for me, it forced me to do that. And I spent, I would say, the majority of 2020 really looking inward and trying to understand and heal a lot of my own ancestral trauma. And really come to the point at this point is I really want to feel whole within myself. And I want to be free of everything and anything that really attaches me to a definition. And it's not easy. It's really hard to try to find myself within myself when we live in a society that's all about career and family and kids and money and health and looks and so on. So my healing journey started when I realized that I need to find the real me. And to do that, I had to take off a lot of masks that we've spent years modifying and putting into place of who we are in society. And it started with a big scary question: is who am I with all the bells without all the bells and whistles? What am I doing here? We come to this earth really as individuals and all wonderful beings in our uniqueness. But then we lose that at some point, and in the process we lose ourselves. And that's something I've been dealing with, and I found many parts of the answer in spiritual teachings. I believe that we have the ability to be who we truly are and act according to our real nature and speak our truth, follow our hearts, and let ourselves be guided by our intuition. And now I believe that I'm a wanderer seeking the truth, seeking my wholeness without borders. And as you've quoted Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, I also want to share one of my favorite quotes of his, where he says, "You're not a drop in the ocean, you're the entire ocean in a drop." And for me, this really symbolizes that the divine feminine is infinite and we are all a reflection of her. And what we are like from within should also be infinite. And so, my journey of making peace with all the struggles and triumphs, putting pieces together to form the real me, or rather, taking off the layers to find the real me, still continues, but continues with many wonderful discoveries. Um, and so to answer your next question about Muslim women and how are we different from our previous generation, um, I love that question because it's something that I've actually been thinking about a lot. I've been having many conversations with my grandmother and looking back at my, great grandmothers and how they lived their life. And I believe that, there are two important aspects. The first is the context of how they lived, and the second is tools they had. So my grandmother's, great grandmother's generation lived under strict family traditions and culture pressure. And the roles were really confined by, family duties, both as young girls and then as mothers. And we belong, luckily, to a generation where social change is being fast tracked by education and by globalization, by access to the internet. And that's the context. So we live in different worlds, I would say. I don't think it has anything to do with religion per se, Islam or other religion, but I think it is the context for the majority of women in many parts of the world. And then you have, of course, the tools of education, employment, and connectivity. So there are about 800 million Muslim women around the world today. And while much work remains to close the equality gap, the rates of education and employment for some have increased dramatically in a short span of time. I believe that education has played a huge role in changing the context for women in the Muslim world. It's allowed them to reclaim their agency, to decrease, societal gender stereotypes, which also promotes an increasing sense of acceptance of women as equal partners in Muslim societies. So as you know, women's education has a multiplier effect on their families and their communities. Like an educated woman would spend differently and prioritize consumption differently. It also changes their aspirations. They want to be part of their economies, not just stay at home and but they want to use their education. And that's a big shift that will really contribute to shine a light on perhaps a previously unseen population, who I'm sure will be a force to be reckoned with. And also, I think connectivity is a big game changer for Muslim women of our generation. So our conversation now, Tazeen, is a case in point. So we can connect anytime from anywhere, learn from each other, support each other, and really push each other forward. And we can also explore the world, understand our struggles better, and equip ourselves with tools that were perhaps not possible 3 decades ago. And we can do that just with a push of a button on our screen or on our phone.
I think that's really beautiful. And I think, I mean, it's fascinating, this kind of evolution of this modern Muslim woman, as I call her. And again, I just wonder, Bodour, leaning into conversations with your mother and grandmother, being so close to the land of the Prophet, peace be upon him, as you are. What in your heart, when you are quiet with your Rabb, do you feel is the Prophet's example and message to bring womankind and humankind in 2021?
Yes, as you've mentioned, Tazeen, we are in a land very close to the Prophet, peace be upon him. And, being a Muslim mother, being a Muslim working woman, does that even kind of exist, so to speak? And a lot of people wonder if it's actually a reality or something we're just dreaming of. I believe it's something that's been debated many years around the Muslim world, where women work regularly. And I think the short answer is yes. Can a modern Muslim woman have it all? But it comes with a caveat, I think. I think Muslim women, have to have a balance between their life and their natural duty as mothers and their legitimate aspirations to be financially independent from their husbands and families. But for this to happen, we need the right environment and the context has to be supportive. And this is where things get really complicated. At the home front, the culture of men doing household duties is picking up at different paces across the Muslim world, but still women are expected to run the household, whether they work outside or not. And this mindset is obviously not helpful because it's mission impossible, I think. So there remains a lot of awareness to be made that majority of Muslim men pull their weight around the home. At the work front, I think there are still some challenges to working mothers. So working hours, for example, short maternity leaves, working conditions and physical environments are not at all conducive to women. And it's not empowering and doesn't contribute to social justice. So I remember when I was pregnant and had to run from meeting to meeting at local or international events, it was just difficult. There was a point where I was in Davos and I was breastfeeding my youngest daughter, and they told me that I couldn't bring her to the meeting because they had no access for babies to enter the conference. And I just thought that's really ridiculous in this day and age. So there are certain things that you can't do, and that really just blocks women's, career aspirations. So work environment has to change for this balance to happen. And I think that there are positive changes that are happening in different parts of the Muslim world. So for example, in Sharjah in 2019, we were crowned UNICEF's baby-friendly city. So we won this award in recognition of like all the efforts that Sharjah did to create a supportive environment of nursing mothers after we introduced the concept of child-friendly city following that. And there were many initiatives that we rolled out. And this is all because of my own personal journey and all of the experiences that I had to face. And I believe there were many women who also went through that. So I think balance is possible when you have the right cultural and logistical environment and the context is guaranteed.
Bodour, how important have your fathers and husbands and the men around you, their support, how important has that been for you?
It's been really, really important. And, I think what we spoke a little bit about earlier is really to talk about, the Prophet, peace be upon him's teachings around women, in our society. And I really believe that women's rights before and after the message of the Prophet, peace be upon him, were not the same. I believe that his message was crystal clear about equality of men and women. And for that, the matter of equality of all people before God, regardless of their origin, color, gender, or social status. And his message was needed in a time where there was extreme patriarchy, tribalism, and to a certain extent, feudalism. And his message, peace be upon him, was anchored in many of the Holy Quran's messages about women and men, which emphasized the concept of equality and the concept of equal responsibility. For example, in Surah An-Nahl, God says, to whoever, male or female, does good deeds and has faith, we shall give a good life and reward them according to the best of their actions. Sadaqallah al-Azim. The message of equal responsibility is clear through this verse, as it's through many others. But I think somewhere along the way, we've forgotten about this and we've turned back into patriarchal structures in which the pure teaching of Islam were adapted to suit a male-dominated culture. And this is where we see the injustices often attached to Islam and to the message of the Prophet, peace be upon him, when they're really just skewed interpretations of this message. And that's why I believe, like right now, it's really crucial that as Muslim women, part of our fight, if you will, should be a call to revise all these interpretations and advocate for a new, unbiased interpretation of the Holy Quran and the message of the Prophet. I don't think we can leave it to men because at best it doesn't affect them, and at worst it protects their natural superiority in society. So we should use our education, our communities, our professional positions and social positions really to exercise our right to read Islamic texts differently through the lenses of both men and women and go back to the original teachings of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And we owe it to our children as well, both boys and girls, to have conversations with them about this subject and raise them equally in all aspects of life. And we should not accept the injustice and just say, we'll just leave it. We need to engage with those who are proponents of the belief that women are inferior to men and they should be put in a backseat of society. So I think as Muslim women, we've got a lot to do and we have to support each other on this journey.
Again, you've touched on so many different themes, and I just want to break a few of these down. I mean, first of all, I always remember Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi's words: women are creative and not created. And I feel what you shared originally beautifully sort of illustrated exactly what he said. And you're right, it's going to take time and conscious effort and awareness on our part to bring through the healing. You know, we grew up being very used to being asked to pray behind the shoe rack in a mosque. It's only very recent that mosques have actually accommodated the respectful and right amount of space for women to be held in there. Today in Saudi, women are still restricted to go close to the feet of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And there is much work at those who are the custodians of the Prophet's resting place that need to be looked at. But inshallah, it will be little by little, one step at a time. Something you touched on really stays with me, which is women supporting women, and what you shared about, you know, this male form of religion. And something that some mystics have alluded to is that patriarchy isn't necessarily blamed purely on the male. Mm-hmm. And this real authenticity of women supporting women, I would love to explore with you some more. Now, I met Chidiago, whose beautiful interview. Also, anyone interested to watch Chidiago, she speaks, she roars, can click on the links below. But I met her through you, Bodour, and the experience of a session that I came into with you and her is this importance of sisterhood. And supporting each other better. And actually, it brings up a lot because women have to then look at some of the darker aspects of the feminine, the jealousies, the fears, the position that we put men in, given for generations, our financial and entire sort of well-being of the family, well-being, emotional well-being was reliant on the masculine. So tell me more about your experience with all of this, and in particular this kind of sisterhood and what that really means for you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And yeah, I really started discovering the importance of sisterhood again during the lockdown, beginning of the pandemic in 2020. And to me, the most important part of sisterhood is that you have a voice and you can share your voice and be heard and accepted, and that you're essential and what you feel and think matters. And that's just beautiful. I discovered that from all the women's circles that we were having, Chidiogo and I, and we've had subsequent events around that as well. And sisterhood really encourages you to stand in your own power more easily and feel like you're enough. And you don't have to play by the social or old boys club rules anymore. So, in a male dominated world, we're always being told to compete, to succeed at all costs, while coexisting harmoniously with our own feminine qualities like compassion, love, and collaboration seem to be the more natural way for us. So, it's not simple, just a community of sisterhood. I think it's essential to bring balance back into this world, and we can exist in the flow of nature. And sisterhood is also freeing. You don't feel alone. You feel like you're 100% supported as you experience these connections, these deep emotional connections with other women. So I think it's important to belong to a community of sisterhood. And there's so many ways in women can support each other. And I shared this story. I don't know if you were with us on the call, but I read it from Brene Brown had shared it in one of her books, where she said that there was a group of women who used to go down to the river and wash their clothes together in the river. And then they finally all got washing machines. But as soon as they got washing machines, they started to get depressed. And they realized that they missed that community of bringing women together, of really sharing that space and talking with each other. And so I think we really have forgotten the importance of community, importance of sisterhood, and it's high time that we bring that back.
Inshallah. And it is really beautiful to have all these different sort of satellite spaces where, women are coming together and recognizing the need to support each other. And it doesn't have to be she has this, that, and the other. What about me? It's kind of shifting that paradigm to she has that. Oh, me too. And good for her. And that real cheerleadering without the sort of jealousies you pointed out and the competitions. I know you touched on this sense of balance. I'd love to hear more about that from you when it comes to mothering and working. And this kind of, can we as modern women have it all? It's something I struggle with myself daily, that sense of balance. So I'd love to hear more about that from you.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I think because we're living in a patriarchally driven world, we try to fit in everything and try to do everything. And I think essentially, if we go back to our divine feminine essence, it's more about being and less about doing. And I think we've been programmed to really succeed and be the top of this and the best at that. And I think this has to change right now. And I think I've seen a shift already, and I've seen a shift into more sort of like feminine leadership as well. So when you look at what's happened in the pandemic, the countries that have fared well are the ones with female leaders. And you look at how they've led their nations, it's really about cooperation and listening and compassion and nurturing, the qualities that we have as women. And so if we connect to that more and we connect to our own gifts, then I believe that things flow much better rather than trying to be a woman in a man's world and compete with that kind of standard.
Beautiful. So I want to talk about your gift with literacy and books. You recently were elected as president of the International Publishers Association. So congratulations. Woman leader, yay, Bodour, that's brilliant. Talk to me about books. What have they brought for your soul? How have you found them healing? And tell me more about this passion for literacy that you're shining the torch for from Shah Jahan.
Thank you. Well, being the second woman president of ITA in 125 years was a little bit of a surprise to us in the industry. And I don't know why it's taken 125 years for us to do that. But this alone tells you how much work we still need to do to close the gap. But in terms of books and literacy, really, my love for books and literacy are deeply rooted in my upbringing and my culture. So I grew up under the roof of two prolific readers, my parents. They were champions of education. And so, growing up and setting sail to study internationally with you, Tazeen, I learned firsthand the power of education in asserting my existence and connecting with the outside world. And I think that really motivated me to champion books and reading and literacy as a necessary tool for human dignity. So, young children without books and literacy are really future stories of misery and suffering, and vice versa. Young children empowered with books and literacy are future stories of creativity and human ingenuity. And so, to me, that's really simple. Today, in the Muslim and Arab world in general, there's a need to reinvent ourselves on many levels. And that can only happen with a generation of independent thinkers. And part of the work that I'm doing as well in the Kalimat Foundation is that we're supporting building libraries in refugee camps, because I think of a generation of children who are really out of school, lost hope in the world, and essentially lost the ability to dream of a better future. And so I really wanted to give them access to beautiful stories and have access to these books that would hopefully change their future in society. So books are really valuable tools in our society, I believe.
How are you finding books in today's world of YouTube and digital content?
We're competing with a lot of content creators, and I think that just puts more pressure on publishers to really create more exciting content. I always tell my fellow publishers that we need to compete with Netflix now. We need to create content that is really, really exciting for people to say, right, I'll pick up a book rather than watch a movie on Netflix. And I think that's our job as publishers, is really to bring the best content out there and repackage it in a way and give it to the consumers. So yeah, we have a lot of work to do. And I think, we can learn a lot from other industries. I don't see them so much as competition, but also as really learning opportunities for us to see what works in other, avenues, and what we can learn from them and how we can bring that to the publishing community.
Beautiful. Now, you mentioned your parents were prolific readers, and I'd love to come back to your parents, Bodour, and talk a little bit about their interfaith work. I remember a while ago, your father enabled a medieval monastery in Armenia. And this was kind of in tandem. I think it was either a bit before or very close to the whole refugee crisis, when Islamophobia suddenly became very mainstream and quite real for a lot of nations and people. And here is your father doing something really beautiful for a Christian monastery. How has this touched and shaped your fabric and being?
In a way, I think I consider myself really lucky to have grown in an open-minded household, really, in an enlightened environment where other faiths were welcomed and respected the same as our faith. So in 2005, my father was visiting Armenia and he was touring various regions, and they were having lunch in this beautiful sort of restaurant on the outskirts of a forest. And after lunch, my father said, I want to go for a walk. And he walked into the forest, and that led him to the monastery. And when he saw this broken down monastery, he generously offered to renovate the complex. According to some of the locals, they said an angel had brought him there so he could come and visit the monastery and rebuild it. And they still remember this beautiful act of interfaith respect that he showed. And while many non-Muslims were surprised with the gesture, many Muslims were not, because his gesture really reflects the teachings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, where non-Muslims lived in peaceful coexistence in Al-Madinah and were protected and respected. So that interfaith harmony is really essential to peace, and I believe it resonates with all the messages of other religions as well. Moreover, the heart of interfaith work really includes different types of conversations that are important to have. It's not just an all-massing concept. I think it's intended to be an exchange of ideas, philosophies, and thoughts that really crack us open and avail us to perspectives and viewpoints perhaps that we wouldn't have thought of. And it promotes mutual understanding as long as we don't compete on who's right and who's wrong. And it should really reinforce our interdependence, our interconnectedness as members of the same race, with the same journey and with the same destiny.
That's so beautiful, Bodour. And as you were sharing, the image really came to heart. There are a couple of Rumi lines that escape me, which I will share for everyone, but they kind of allude to the image of when we all congregate around the Kaaba. And I remember one of the things that really struck me on Hajj is being amongst the sea of colours where everyone's donning white. And the image that I've always felt was really beautiful when I first heard it is when everyone sort of prays from north, south, east, west around the Kaaba. And then if you actually lift the Kaaba, you've got everyone bowing and prostrating to each other from all over the world, irrespective of race, class, creed. So thank you so much. What a beautiful, beautiful example and much nourishing and cherished lessons for us all.
Thank you, Tazeen. It's been really a pleasure talking to you. Your questions have really given me a chance to put my thoughts out and really think about very important subjects that perhaps I wouldn't have been, so vocal about. So thank you so much for this opportunity. And I look forward to seeing the other interviews as well.
Thank you so much, lovely, for your time and wishing you all the best. May the literacy and love that you're sharing reach many, many hearts. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me on Tazeen TV. Now, as a transformational life coach, I help and support those who might be feeling stuck or who just want to connect deeper to their sense of self and purpose. So maybe have a look at some of our offerings and why not join me on one of our free workshops to begin that journey of aligning and optimizing your life. Now, for those wishing to better their telepresence, you can find out more about our media training offerings. Again, have a look at the website, and I look forward to continuing journeying with you soon.